So what if I told you the reason you're not reaching your goals isn't because you're like money, time, or luck? Your mindset is the only thing that's limiting you. And this isn't some wild spiritual talk, it's deeply anchored in psychological literature. Most people have what's called a fixed mindset. They believe that their intelligence and abilities are limited, which stops them from changing the circumstances of their lives. And in contrast, successful people cultivate what's called a growth mindset, allowing continuous learning and achievement. The difference that they have is the way they built their mindset. You aren't born with it, you need to develop it. So the question becomes, how do you get from a fixed mindset to building a growth mindset? So if you believe that your abilities, intelligence, and beliefs are static, that they're unlikely to change over time, you're cultivating what's called a fixed mindset, which is a mindset that's shared by at least 40% of the population. Things are unchangeable and you must navigate life with what you're dealt. The way you perceive your world, your emotions, your experiences, and the outcomes of your life is dictated by this mindset. So your mindset is a state of mind that influences the way you think and the way you act accordingly to your thoughts and beliefs. That's the reason why there's a certain sense of resignation that comes with the fixed mindset. Life may not be depressing, but it has a bitter taste because you believe you can't become the person you aspire to be. And the problem is that you may abandon your dreams, seeing them as unreachable, since you view your intelligence as set in stone and your capabilities to learn as limited. That's the nature of the mindset. It's immutable. And you have to be careful if you're operating under that mindset and watching self-improvement content, because it can actually aggravate the situation for a bit, as you just risk to get caught in the endless watching but never actually putting in practice, which does amplify guilt and procrastination. And the way you handle challenge is the second key component. People that nurture a fixed mindset will see challenges as terrifying monsters. They panic and they have no idea how they're going to get over this, since they feel like they're not equipped to fight this back. And this oftentimes, well, if not most of the time, this leads to avoidance, either emotional by ignoring negative feelings as they arise, or physical by procrastinating and never engaging in necessary actions. This also comes from the fact that when you have a fixed mindset, you see effort as useless. As a result, failure becomes a threatening sword hanging over your head, ready to fall at any moment. And this relationship with failure is just too close and unhealthy, as it feels like failure is just a measure of your abilities. And since the nature of this mindset is immutable, it's not just that your abilities aren't good enough, it's that you'll never be good enough at these things to succeed. This is precisely what shatters self-esteem and undermines self-worth. So feedback is another issue. Since failure is so intimidating and your effort are seen as fruitless, you don't want people to comment on your actions and your performance, as it only adds to the burden. You become scared of the feedback instead of learning from it. And that's why people with a fixed mindset are afraid of the feedback and they just tend to avoid it. They give too much power to it and they're scared that it might somehow break their efforts. And others do not just become threats to your performance, you also develop envy towards those who succeed. Jealousy is cultivated and you end up rationalizing it with luck, circumstances, and excuses. Because acknowledging that they are better at what they do than you would confirm the fact that you aren't good enough at what you're doing currently. Now I've presented the extreme. Keep in mind that this concept of mindset is fluid and it's a continuum. Because everything in psychology is never black and white. It's nuanced, it moves, it flows, and that's the key to understanding how to get away from this mindset. And the goal isn't to see this as a diagnosis, but if you recognize yourself in this description, don't worry, because I'm going to detail exactly how to get away from this and what you're looking for instead. Because at the other side of the spectrum, there is growth mindset, which is the work of Carol Dweck. This mindset is by nature flexible, allowing for expansion, growth, and self-improvement. So if you're currently watching self-improvement content, this is exactly what you need to cultivate. Unlike the fixed mindset, which views abilities as static, the growth mindset sees every point in your life as a starting place and every experience as an opportunity for growth. You view challenges not as obstacles, but as opportunities to expand your knowledge and develop your character. More than that, failure isn't this monster, but just a part of the learning process. And you free yourself of the failure burden because you understand that failure is to be expected. You normalize its impact and it doesn't define you as a person. More than that, you get around the fact that being new to something means expecting to fail at first. And failure just becomes this valuable feedback from your environment instead of being this terrifying monster that you have to slay. That's when efforts are seen as highly valuable, as you just realize that these are essential for acquiring better qualities and enhancing your traits. With that mindset, you aim your focus on the quality of the engagement and the level of focus and attention that you have, rather than tunnel vision on the outcomes of your work. And I think that's one of the biggest shifts right here. Not focusing on the results when you're starting, but detaching yourself from it and instead focusing on the quality of your input. Because as you start, that's when the ratio between the input and the output is the worst. Growth mindset embraces constructive criticism, even when negative, because it's just seen as key to improvement. In fact, this is seen as one of the best predictor for improvement of the performance. You need to receive detailed and accurate feedback about what you're doing. And you do that by zooming out, detaching yourself from your actions, because you just understand that your identity is greater than the simple feedback. You're clear about your intentions to improve regardless of the current outcome. It's not about now, it's about what will you be able to do and produce in 2, 5, or 10 years. Finally, instead of envying others, you find aspirations in their achievements, seeing their success as just a proof that it's possible for you. Now, growth mindset is an ideal. And if you should aspire to work on reshaping your mindset for it to look like this, there will still be some high and lows, and you cannot aim for a growth mindset 100% of the time. And even if you're operating under a growth mindset, let's say 80% of the time, it won't make you invincible against adversity. And that's a very important thing to outline, because life is still happening, and the only thing that you do control is how you react to what's happening around you. That being said, even if it's not the solution to a happy life, growth mindset is the most important thing you need to work on if you want to reinvent yourself. And in conclusion, the two mindsets can be summarized as follow. Fixed mindset is how can I prove my value? Whereas growth mindset is just how can I improve? Now, again, I want to emphasize the fact that the first step to initiate the transition between fixed mindset to growth mindset is to understand that you're moving on a continuum and you're going to walk step by step on this spectrum. And the transition from one to another is a process that requires time, patience, and iteration. But here's the tool that I found in order to move towards cultivating a growth mindset. The first significant barrier that you will encounter is your cognitive biases. And in particular, it would be confirmation bias, which is the tendency of people to favor information that confirms or strengthens their beliefs. This is just human nature, and everyone's more or less affected that way, because your brain's biggest fear is to come up to the conclusions that your beliefs are wrong and your perception was flawed from the beginning, as this will just result in what's called failure of reality. And this is dangerous because if you're convinced that your abilities are immutable and that your intelligence is limited, which is the case when you're operating under a fixed mindset, you will consciously and unconsciously bias the cues that you're receiving from your environment to confirm these beliefs, resulting in you being your own stop for growth. You'll end up finding every excuse is not to change, simply because your perception is heavily and negatively influenced by these beliefs through this confirmation bias. And the most insidious aspect is that at first you won't even be aware of it, because that bias will seem like rational thinking and legit. That's the reason why the first step to transitioning to a growth mindset is increasing thought awareness. You need to be able to recognize and accept the fact that your thinking is sometimes flawed. And for many, I think that proximity is the issue. They're just too close to their thoughts, which take up too much headspace and lead to dramatic reactions. So the first thing to do is to learn how to distance yourself from your immediate surrounding. This is a hard skill to learn, but if you practice it on a daily basis, you'll be able to feel the difference rapidly. And you want to adopt the position of an observer. creating mental headspace when you can sit and observe what's happening without overreacting or heavily judging your thoughts. And this ability right here is going to enable you to first identify limiting thoughts that root deep in beliefs that are linked to a fixed mindset. The goal after you've identified them is to question them. Try to poke it day by day. And the good thing is that if you expose yourself to these thoughts without being scared of it, you realize that they're fairly easy to spot, as they just don't align with your reality that much. They just feel like counterfeit. And here's the method I found to get to that level of thought awareness. So the first thing you have to do is acknowledge your starting point. Realize that where you're standing right now is where you're starting your journey. And everything begins here. Improvement is always possible. And at this point, your limiting beliefs will probably try to convince you that you've missed your shot and you're already too old to improve. That's to be expected. Limiting thoughts are going to arise as a result of you trying to change. It's like your brain is fighting back the change. And acceptance is key here because you need to convince yourself that you're allowed to start. And that doesn't mean that you won't be feeling any negative emotion again. It simply means that you're promising yourself to start to reshape your mindset. And the best tools that I've found for that are 1, journaling, or 2, meditation. These are the most effective practices to learn how to distance yourself from your thoughts in order to be able to analyze them. Now, don't overwhelm yourself. You just pick one of the two in order to start. And I personally think that journaling is best to start, as it's just material and it leaves a written trace that you can come back to whenever needed. So each day, implement the habit of taking 10 minutes at the end of your day and put yourself in a bubble, in a quiet space, to write about your day, how you felt, and how you reacted to your thoughts or to what was happening in your day. This will force your brain to take a step back and view your experiences from an outside perspective. Again, don't overthink it. Don't overwhelm yourself when you're starting this. Don't think about it. Just try to let it flow. And as you start, you won't be able to access your thoughts easily, but that's okay. You just have to engage. And if you're locked, just write what you're thinking about. So from there, after a few weeks, you'll be able to review and analyze your journal entries. Compare your past thoughts to your current ones. Treat this journal like data, just like a scientist will do. Observe without judgment to better understand your thought processes. And trust me, this will be immensely useful in identifying recurring beliefs that are limiting your mindset from expanding. It will push you towards accepting that as a human, your perception is inherently flawed. And with practice and awareness, you'll be able to identify those distortions and correct it in your mind afterwards. And after you've engaged in this habit for a few weeks or even months, you will become more aware of your thought processes. You then will be able to recognize negative and biased thoughts as they occur. That's when you will gradually start to introduce new growth-oriented thoughts to counteract the unhelpful ones. For example, if your brain tells you you're not good at this and you will never be, which is a reflection of a fixed mindset, you counter that thought with, I'm not good at this yet, but I can improve with practice and effort. I've already been doing some progress. By consistently replacing negative thoughts with constructive ones, over time, what happens is that you'll gradually erode the negative beliefs that are hiding underneath and move towards reshaping your mindset. And this is how you start the transition from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset, enabling you to grow, learn, and improve every day. So I truly hope this helps. Trust the process.